Welcome back to Landmarks Discovered. In this episode, we'll visit the lake house on Pendleton Lane.
Built in 1946, this house is really the beginning of the new boom development after World War II.
And it's interesting the year that it was built because many of the homes on the street are a little bit earlier and were actually built during the Depression.
And most of the houses on Pendleton Avenue and Pendleton Lane are spec houses. But what's interesting about the lake house is actually commissioned by the Gibsons.
And another fact that unites all of these homes is that they were almost all of them designed by John Volk.
And when we were filming this episode, I never knew that Pendleton Lane was separate from Pendleton Avenue.
I learned that as well. And I think it's an important distinction, especially because what's unique about Pendleton Lane is how cohesive it is as a streetscape. With the exception of one property immediately to the south of 4 South Lake Trail, all of the homes are original to the period and are constructed in the Monterey style. So it has a very unique feel.
The lake house is the first home to be landmarked on Pendleton Lane.
And it's important that you point that out because I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the landmarks process.
I think this house is a great example of modern day landmarking. The house has been around for 75 years, and throughout that time, it's had various additions put on. But it still retains that initial character that John Volk set out to do as a Monterey house with kind of British colonial details. And I think that showcases that a landmark is not frozen in time. I feel like we say that a lot on here, but it really showcases how this house has developed over time and is so reflective of the stewardship of its owners.
The first owner, Henry Gibson, was an astronomer who actually built an observatory on the property, which today functions as the pool house. A notable fact is that he owned, at the time, the 10th largest telescope in the world. The current owner, Kit Pannell, is an avid gardener who is known for her horticultural expertise. And she has actually added a slat house to the property, which is now another prominent feature.
And she so transformed those gardens around the property that she was the most recent recipient of our Leslie S. Smith Landscape Award.
And I think it's notable that the designation report itself for this property recognizes her contributions to the evolution of the property. For the first time in a very long time, the budget for landmarking has actually been doubled, which has allowed the town's landmarks consultants to consider 25 properties for landmarking as opposed to the usual 10.
And I think what's also really exciting about this season for landmarking is the lake house was actually volunteered to be landmarked by its owner. And it's pretty rare that we get owners wanting to volunteer their house for landmarking.
And Kit Pannell, who is the owner of 4 South Lake Trail, is really just an exceptional individual for wanting to do this. I think that she certainly, sets a model for stewardship within the town, and I really enjoyed sitting down to speak with her about her reasons for landmarking her home.
I decided to voluntarily landmark my house because I found out, first of all, that they just had to keep the outside of the house but could do whatever they wanted to on the inside. And also because all the houses on this street were designed by John Volk. And I kind of like that continuity of all that. And the only one that wasn't was my neighbor to the south who tore down the John Volk house and built a house that looks like a pizza parlor. Also because I just didn't want something to happen like what happened just to the south of me, which has no resemblance to any house on the street. I think the street should be sort of, all the houses look a little bit alike. Well, the Preservation Foundation helped me decide or explain to me that if I landmarked it, that it really wouldn't keep the people from doing whatever they wanted to inside, and they could add on something to it or to one side, they just had to keep the house intact on the outside. I feel like another reason for landmarking the house is because once somebody tears it down, it's finished, gone, and they're not going to rebuild the house back the way it was. So it just would be one more thing down the tube. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's good for the town. When I first married my second husband, we decided we couldn't live in Virginia because we had to leave, just everything behind and start over. So he said, well, I have this apartment in Palm Beach, but I've never seen it. So I said, oh, okay, because his friends came down and they played golf on the weekends, and they told me he had to buy an apartment in the Lowell house because they wanted to control the house. So anyhow, he bought the apartment, and he said, I said, I'll look at it. It was so ugly, I couldn't even believe it. And so I said, all right, well, I guess I can be here for a few minutes. So anyhow, we were there like about a year. And after that, I said, I've got to have a house. If we're going to stay down here longer and be down here, I like grass and I like gardens and all that. Then we found this house, which was next to a good friend of mine, Lacey Foster. And the man was 103 years old. And the house was the worst looking thing you've ever seen. And it had a chain link fence around the front, and he had cats, and it was just a disaster, and railings and everything. And my husband said, I just can't believe you're going to buy this house. It's just so hideous. I can't even believe it. And I said, don't worry. In a year and a half, it's going to be fabulous. So we began to renovate it. I walked in, and there was the water, and it had this central hallway, and it's kind of like a Virginia house. It's not one of these modern sort of, typical, whatever you want to call it. But I just liked it because it was very conventional in my style. Well, when I walk in the door, I first see the lake because you see through, it goes right through. But that's my library. And then to the left is my living room. And then to the right is just a very traditional house is my dining room, and then the kitchen's behind that. And then I also have a guest suite, which is off porch from the dining room. The space that I'm in now was originally an observatory, and it was all closed in. And it had a hole in the ceiling because, we wanted to look at the stars. So we had to keep the footprint, but we decided to make it a pool house, and we took all the walls down, made it a pool house. All the houses were done by Arnold Construction. At least that's what I was told. And Mr. Arnold, the son of the man that built all these houses, he's still there, and he's 93. And he owns a big piece of property, which goes behind my slide house property. And I called him and I asked if I would have first refusal on the property. And so he said yes, and then he came back about a couple of years later and said he wanted to sell it. So my husband and I bought it because we wanted to extend our garden. And so we built our slat house, and I have my orchids in there and all my kind of weird, crazy plants. I like euphorbias, and that's kind of a family of plants that it's a huge family of plants, but I like weird plants. If you go in there and take pictures of them, you'll see they're weird. I knew Jane Volk just very casually, and she was happy that I'd bought the house, and we chatted a bit about that. But I think it would be very meaningful to Jane Volk if she knew that I had landmarked the house.
The year-long process that we have gone through with Kit in pursuing landmarking her property really exemplifies the way the Preservation Foundation serves as a resource to the community. We're really here to help property owners navigate through all phases of landmarking, from designations to alterations and additions. We're so grateful to Kit Panel for voluntarily designating her home and serving as a model of stewardship. It's people like her whose actions ensure the town retains its charm. Thanks for joining us for Landmarks Discovered. We'll see you next time when we visit another landmark property in the town of Palm Beach.